All right, welcome back to Western Civ. We left off with Charlemagne's empire, his death, and then the collapse as it goes to his grandchildren and they begin fighting each other. We're looking at another aspect here in the 800s, 900s, and all the way to 1000. This era time of 3 centuries, basically. Europe is actually in pretty big trouble, or it would appear to be in pretty big trouble. Let's talk about some things going on, not just Charlemagne's empire not working out very well, but there's a lot of other stuff going on. Migrations. This always has happened through European history, people migrating into Europe from Asia. Well, it continues on. You know, we know the German migrations brought down the Roman Empire. Well, as we get in the 800s, you start getting this migration of more people from Asia. Who are they this time? The Slavs. Coming in from the east, coming into Europe from the east. And again, they'll, much like the Germans had done, they'll hit civilization and kind of get stopped right there. Well, who are these Slavs? Because they'll end up settling in this area of Eastern Europe. Well, perhaps you've heard of them before. Russians. The people who settle in this area here are Russians. They're Slavs. Poles, the ones who make it to here, are Poles. And then a smaller group, Czechs, around the city of Prague there. And then behind them, Slovaks. And then to the south, Bulgars. Bulgars coming down to here. The Romanians are in here, and the Romanians will consider themselves to be descendants of the Romans, not Slavs. But the Bulgars eventually will come down here, and we know about the country of Bulgaria. So these are all Slavic people migrating into Europe and then getting stopped about the time they hit European civilization. One of the problems is Christianity. These people coming in, many of them are not Christians, but some of them are. Some of them are being Christianized by missionaries. And the missionaries that they're experiencing are coming up from the Eastern Orthodox Church, from Istanbul, Constantinople at this time, Constantinople, the leading city of the Eastern Christian Church. And this is, Eastern Orthodox. A lot of Slavs will experience, as their missionaries, 2 Greek brothers. In the 860s, 2 Greek brothers coming up from Constantinople. Their names are Cyril and Methodius. They are brothers, and they will begin to preach and convert Slavs that they meet. In fact, as they begin to deal with the Slavic people, they'll recognize that their language pattern is different than anything they've also experienced, and they will actually create an alphabet for those people. This will be called the Cyrillic alphabet for the Slavic people, and they'll write a Bible in this Cyrillic alphabet. And then at the death of Cyril, he will become Saint Cyril. Methodius will die later on and become quite famous also. So the twin brothers, one of them becomes a saint, but really important that they're Christianizing the Slavs and spreading this new Cyrillic alphabet, basically creating civilization for these people. Another migration, not a Slavic people, but another migration into Europe at this time are the Magyars. Have you heard of them before? Well, let me tell you where they're going to settle down, and perhaps you've heard of them. They come in, and they are raiding all around Europe, and they eventually are defeated in the heart of Europe at a place called Lechfeld in 955. So we're getting close to 1000 now, when these people are finally defeated and forced to settle down. Where do they settle down? They're going to settle down around the same place that Attila had worked out of, the city of Budapest. Budapest, the twin cities of Budapest. And this will become the Magyar capital. We in English still go back to the days of Attila when this was his capital, and we call that area the land of the Huns, or Hungary. But if you get a chance to go to Hungary today, they'll remind you that they're not Huns, that they are Magyars. In fact, on their money, and you'll see it all over the place, that they are the Magyar Republic. We just call them Hungary, because these people are not Huns. They're Magyars. So that's this group settling in. Here's a little map of the Magyar migration. You can see them coming in here and then raiding all over Europe, to the north, to the west, to the south, all the way down to Constantinople, and then the Battle of Lechfeld right there, and then finally settling down in the area of modern-day Hungary, or today the Magyar Republic. There's the famous defeat of the Magyars, forcing them to settle down and stop raiding. Another thing going on in the 800s are more bad things. Charlemagne again, dying, passing it on to his son, his empire to his son, and then on to the grandsons who fight each other. Really bad timing, because This will be the age, the 800s, of the Vikings. All over Europe, these Vikings are going to be raiding and causing terror throughout Europe. Where do they come from? They come from Scandinavia. Well, if you don't know where Scandinavia is, let me mention some modern countries to you. The country of Denmark, sticking up out of Europe. That peninsula will be a land of the Vikings. Norway, hanging down into Europe, and then next to it, Sweden. These are the Viking areas. And they come in their dragon ships. These Vikings have a specialized ship that they can use. It's great in ocean water. It's great in river water. It's got a flat bottom to it, so it can go all the way up rivers. They're referred to in Europe as the Northmen, the men from the north, or this will be called the Norsemen, or the Vikings. They go by lots of different names as they are going to raid all over Europe. There's their Viking ships. It's just small groups of raiders. Sometimes, though, they'll mass armies together. And, you know, it's something that we kind of like today. We kind of find them very romantic. I don't think you'd find them very romantic if you lived where they might be attacking you, because they were not nice people. They are there to rape and pillage and then leave. Here's a map of Europe with the blue lines all over it showing the Viking raids from Scandinavia all around the North Sea, and then all the way down to Spain, into the Mediterranean, all the way into the land of Russia, all the way up and down these Russian rivers here, into Poland, all the way to the Black Sea, all the way up the Danube River. It's just unbelievable. The whole map of Europe covered with Viking raids. And then you might happen to notice one up in the northeast up here from Scandinavia all the way to Iceland and Greenland. When I was a kid, we were told that there was a theory that maybe the Vikings had made it over to the North American continent before Columbus ever came over. And of course, that was just, you know, some kind of strange conspiracy. Nowadays, it is pretty much held as to be believed that it's really not that far from Norway over to Iceland, Greenland, to North America. And we believe they did this. We believe that there were Vikings who made it all the way to North America. But for us, we want to talk about some of the things that they did a little closer to home. For instance, in England, their impact in England is tremendous. They will hit the northeast coast. Again, this is the coast that's closest to Norway. They'll be able to find their way from Norway over to England, and they'll begin raiding. The first documented raid of the Vikings is in 793, when they will hit an island with a monastery there. Just a bunch of peaceful monks get hit by these Viking raiders and hauled away, and then the raids will continue. And then eventually, looking about 100 years there, it's about 100 years of raids before some of the Vikings start to settle down in northeastern England, and they will call it Danelaw, around the city of York. In fact, if you get a chance to go to York today, they're quite proud of their Viking heritage. And they continue to raid. They don't just decide to become peaceful, but they'll tell the people of England that you can pay a tribute, and the tribute will be called Danegeld. So basically it's an extortion. They will extort the people of England to pay them off, not to raid. Here's a map showing from Norway and Denmark landing there around the city of York, and then claiming this as their Danelaw. And then also all the way to Dublin. If you get a chance to go to Ireland today, they're proud of their Viking heritage. So all the way around the northern part of Scotland, all the way to Ireland, raiding and landing and settling on the British Isles. In France, they will be raiding into the Frankish lands, raiding the coast at first and then working their way up the rivers. In fact, they'll go all the way up the Seine River in their dragon ships, these flat-bottomed ships, all the way to Paris. They'll be able to work their way all the way, landing here and working their all the way to Paris, past Rouen, all the way to Paris. Just unbelievable raids. And some of these are huge army raids. And then eventually, some of these Vikings will settle down on a peninsula right there. You know, we don't need to keep going back and forth. Let's just settle down. What's that peninsula? Well, when the Normans land there, the Norsemen land there, it'll be called the Peninsula of Normandy once the Vikings claim it. And in 911, something important happens. In 911, one of their leaders named Rollo will kind of make a deal with the king of the Franks, and the king of the Franks will name him a duke. He will become Duke Rollo, the Duke of Normandy, underneath the French king. Now, this is very important. It stops a lot of the raiding, but it also, I'm not sure if Rollo understood what was happening here, but this places him under the king of the Franks. This will be very important in English-French relations later on, that this duke has placed himself, this Viking, has placed himself under the king of the Franks. So that's where we stand at about in the 900s and about 1000. Let's switch gears here and talk about the Catholic Church, or excuse me, the Christian Church. Because what happens in Europe is going to be a split between East and West. The church is going to break into two. Let's go back and look at some church relations. What's happening? Well, in the 300s, if you remember, Constantine called for a Council of Nicaea trying to unite all the different churches together, and that worked pretty well. And then by 400, this thing has spread like wildfire, and it is now the official religion of the Romans, and then the empire collapses. Not good for the empire or Christianity. Well, back in the eastern side of the empire, which did not collapse, the Eastern Church will go on as business as usual. They will have their capital city at Constantinople, the head of the church at Constantinople. They will continue using the Greek. The original Gospels and the letters of Paul were in Greek, and they'll continue to use that. And the leader of the church will be the patriarch, actually underneath the emperor. The emperor will play, going from Constantine's time, a strong role in leadership of the church, but the church father will be called the patriarch. So you'll have an emperor and a patriarch. In the Western church, there is no more emperor. So what do you do there? Well, they continue to work out of Rome. They translate the Bible into Latin, so Latin, the language of the Romans, will be their Latin language. And then the descendant of St. Peter will claim that he's the father of the church and go by the term Pope. So you have this, what was one church, now becoming two churches, and it gets further and further apart as they're doing everything differently, Greek and Latin, and they're split by geography, and they're split by warfare as Europe is falling apart. You end up with two churches, in fact. And then in 863, the time we're looking at here of Charlemagne, the patriarch of the East, a guy named Photius, causes a schism, a complete break, as he excommunicates the Pope in Rome, because the Pope in Rome began to change the Nicene Creed, going back to the Council of Nicaea, the declaration of what the church believes. Well, the Pope began to change it, and the patriarch will claim that that's a complete break and cause the complete schism of an Eastern church and a Western church. And again, that's the time of the Viking raids. It's the time of the Slavic migrations. You know, Europe is not doing well as the churches are split into two. One more thing to look at, and this could be under the category of, well, not something terrible, but something that's happening here in the 800s and 900s and 1000, is that there's a new creation, a thing called the Holy Roman Empire. Well, again, it's caused by the migration of the Slavs as they're moving into Europe in the 800s, and then you get the Magyars coming in the 800s and 900s. The Saxons, a German tribe called the Saxons, will be the ones to have to try to stand up. And it'll be under the leadership of one of their kings named Otto in the mid-900s that he will begin to battle for Christianity, stopping the Slavs and stopping the Magyars. He is the one who defeats the Magyars at the Battle of Lechfeld in 955, and that's where he will become Otto the Great, and the Magyars will settle in Budapest. And then in 962, just a couple of years after the Great Battle of Lechfeld, the Pope will step in and create this Holy Roman Empire, giving power to Otto. It is a Holy Roman Empire created by the Pope, hoping to restore the Roman Empire, going back to the recent days of Charlemagne. Charlemagne was only 100 years ago, so trying to create the Roman Empire or Charlemagne's empire and creating an emperor to rule over all these kings. And the first Holy Roman Emperor is Otto, the winner of the Battle of Lechfeld, Otto the Great. If you'd like to know what territory we're talking about the central part of Europe. This part of Europe, extending actually all the way down to Rome here, and then all the way up to the Baltic Sea, these central states of Europe. Again, the Slavic migrations here, and the Holy Roman Empire will stand to hold back the Slavic migrations. So let's talk about this Holy Roman Empire. It is, the joke goes, of course, that it's neither holy nor Roman nor much of an empire. That's just the joke. I didn't make it up. But it has an element of truth to it, in that holy, the Pope created it, but will very quickly not have much of a say in it. It's not Roman. The Romans never conquered much of that area. And then an empire, it does have an emperor, but an emperor with not much power. So let's talk about this joke, in fact. It's attempt to revive Charlemagne's empire. The emperor, however, isn't made by the greatest powerful man. He will be elected by 7 electors. 7 princes will be chosen to make a selection. And the problem here is that when you want to be the Roman emperor, Holy Roman Emperor, you've got to go around and try to curry votes. You need 4 votes to be elected emperor. And in doing that, you had to make some deals. In fact, if you were an elector, the deal would be, if I vote for you as emperor, you agree to leave me alone. In other words, I don't want a strong emperor. Someone's going to tell me what to do. In fact, there will only be a strong emperor if danger is present, if the Slavs are attacking, or if later on the Turks are attacking, then you'll want a strong, powerful warrior emperor. If not, if there is no danger, you'll pick the weakest guy because you don't want an emperor enforcing things when there's no need. And so, again, that's why it's really not much of an empire. Only if there's danger do the German states and all these states pull together. And then the Pope, he was supposed to have the final say. He's supposed to have power over the emperor, but it's going to be very clear from the beginning that he's at the southern part of the empire and his word doesn't carry too far north. In fact, Italy will be kind of an attraction to these Germans. These Germans are up to the north and poor, and then Italy's to the south and, much more wealthy. And so a lot of Germans will be very happy to be tied to Italy because they'll want that money from Italy. And the Italians won't be getting much taxation coming down toward Rome. So here's a colorful map of this colorful empire extending from Rome all the way up to the North Sea and all these different states. And sometimes they get along and sometimes they don't. They tend to get along better if they're being attacked by somebody, but if there is no danger, then they tend to separate from each other and want nothing to do with each other and want a weak emperor. Another aspect is going to be, of the holy idea, is that the Pope very quickly is removed from this whole thing. The problem comes between the Pope and the emperor over church offices, all these different areas and church offices, and again, there's a lot of money involved here because everybody pays tithes. The way this is supposed to work is that, these are churchmen, educated men who understand the Bible, and so they're supposed to be appointed through the church. Well, there's a lot of money involved here, and, if they're appointed by the church and they start taking the tithes back to Rome, the money just disappears. And so it becomes pretty quickly apparent that it'd be nice if you could kind of get your guys into those church positions. In fact, the further you are from Rome, the emperor is going to be able to invest his people into church offices. If somebody dies, it could be years before the role is filled, and the emperor will say, look, I got to fill this place. And so he, the emperor, a layman, will invest his people into church offices. This is called lay investiture, a lay person putting men into church offices. And then, of course, they're his people and making sure that the money comes toward him or stays in the empire. Well, in 1075, the Pope has had enough of this battle between the Pope and the emperor. The Pope issues a papal bull forbidding lay investiture. You cannot receive a church office from a lay person. It must be done through the church. Well, the Holy Roman Emperor at this time is a guy named Henry IV, pretty powerful guy, or a man who wants to be a powerful emperor, and he will go on investing his people into church offices, and the Pope's response eventually will be to excommunicate him. This is the death sentence issued from a pope, literally, that, when you're cut off from the church, when you're excommunicated from the church, there is no communication, you can't be saved. And the problem with this is when people know that you will not be going to heaven, then the feudal system breaks down, because the feudal system is one of oaths, 2 Christians swearing an oath. Well, if one Christian is going to hell, then the feudal system doesn't apply anymore. And this begins to break down the entire empire and all the feudal binds. And so the empire begins to fall apart. Henry IV begins to suffer as no one's obeying him. And in 1077, just 2 years after the excommunication, in 1077, he will go to Canossa. This is the famous expression, going to Canossa, asking for forgiveness. The Holy Roman Emperor goes to Canossa. It's in the wintertime. The emperor comes to the Pope's palace at a place called Canossa. It's in the wintertime, and the guard makes the emperor stand out in the snow for 3 days, barefoot, hoping to see the Pope. He eventually gets in and has to beg forgiveness from the Pope, and the Pope restores him to the Catholic Church. This isn't the end of the issue. In fact, Henry IV here will eventually leave from Canossa and begin immediately plotting how to return to lay investiture. So this isn't the end of the thing. But in 1077, you can see a very powerful pope here forcing an emperor to his knees. We're not too far from the Crusades, and powerful emperor is going to take a powerful emperor to call the knights of Europe to go on crusade.